Hey YouTube, Joyboy here. So, today I want to bring up a very old topic, in my opinion, one of my best theories that I have discussed on my channel, because I do believe that nearing the end of Whole Cake Island and the beginning of the Reverie and Wano, this theory will become relevant. And given that I last talked about this nearly a year ago, a refresher is necessary. But before we get into this video, I do want to talk about my last video about Admiral Fujitora and his possible plans going into the future. Now guys, YouTube does some very strange things, and sometimes I post videos and for a couple hours after I post them, it's almost as if YouTube doesn't even know that the video is there for many users. It doesn't promote it, or it doesn't show up for some people. Only very few have access to it. I have absolutely no idea why this is the case, but I do know that this is a problem for many YouTubers, including big ones such as like Keemstar. I've seen talk about this. And so usually I just sort of accept it and ignore it. You know, if the video doesn't get as many views as any others, it's not usually a big deal for me. But for the last one, I really thought it was good, so if you haven't seen it, I do recommend checking it out. Some people go through the trouble of actually deleting the video and then trying to re-upload it to see if it catches on early or not, but I'm not about that action. But yeah guys, let's again talk about the traitor on Zou. And if you have checked out my very oldest videos on this topic, I'm just gonna let you know straight up that my thoughts haven't changed, they've only gotten stronger. So to start off guys, I believe that there is persuasive evidence to suggest that there is a traitorous mink on Zou that specifically sold out Zou and Raizo's location to Jack and Kaido. Wanda stated the question for us: how exactly did Jack manage to arrive at our island? And why did they think that there would be a samurai here? Regardless of your answer to these questions are very valid. It should be pointed out that Zou is known as the Phantom Island because the island itself is a living being. Log posts do not point to it, so normally it would be impossible to find. The way the minks themselves deal with this problem is through vivre cards, essentially having a vivre card of somebody who lives on the island so that they can always follow the vivre card back to Zou. And so going back to this idea of how exactly did Jack arrive on Zou, and the minks usually doing this through use of a vivre card, Inuarashi says this: our enemies probably have a vivre card leading them to this place. How in the world did they get their hands on such a thing? Now granted, Oda could do something crazy, but clearly what he is trying to intimate to us here is that Jack did in fact have a vivre card, which he would have gotten by some means from a mink. Now there's really only two reasonable ways in which this could have happened. On one hand, the Kaido pirates, the Beast pirates, could have found a mink and essentially tortured him or just taken his or her vivre card. On the other hand, they could have a mink working for them. Based on this alone, we wouldn't know. But this is the definitive evidence in my mind, which is how exactly did Jack know for sure that Raizo was on Zou? No matter how many times the minks lied, no matter how persuasive their lies were, Jack did not believe them. And I think that it is because it wasn't a question. He knew Raizo was there somewhere. He just needed one of them to tell him where. And so for me, it seems pretty clear that they didn't just follow Raizo to Zou. They weren't watching Raizo as he climbed the back of the elephant, which means that they would have had some kind of intelligence from Zou itself telling them that Raizo had arrived, that Raizo was there. And then later telling them that there were minks on this island who were protecting his location. If they were so close that they could actually track Raizo, Raizo would not have been surprised, nor the minks, at the Beast Pirates' arrival. This, for me, highly substantiates the notion of a traitorous mink. Despite what it is that has been revealed about the minks, I know that many of you out there think that the minks as a collective are way too loyal to ever do anything against anyone that they care about, but I believe that there is at least one. Because if you do not believe this, then you must believe in something absolutely crazy that is far less justifiable. Ideas such as the possibility that there is a devil fruit user on Kaido's crew who has the ability to see places very far away from them with a similar power to perhaps Viola of Dressrosa and can sort of keep an eye on where the samurais are going. This is potentially possible along with many other things, but the most straightforward answer you could give is that there is somebody on Zou who would most likely be a mink who saw Raizo arrive and informed Jack and Kaido. And then we know that Raizo was protected by the Guardians of the Whale Forest, and that they hid him inside of the whale tree on Zou, where the poneglyph is being kept. So this same person who informed Jack and Kaido that Raizo was there must not have been aware of where exactly the Guardians were keeping him. And this, I believe, adds up with the majority of minks not knowing where exactly Inuarashi, Nekomamushi, and the Straw Hats and the Samurai went when they retrieved Raizo, as though Raizo's location was kept secret from the majority of the minks there. This would also suppose that the majority of minks are not aware that there is a poneglyph being kept secretly within the whale tree. That this is knowledge only privy to the Guardians of the Whale Forest and the leaders of the country. And I think this also adds up with the door that leads to the poneglyph within the whale tree also being, quote, impossible to find. So to bring this around, it seems most likely to me that there is a traitorous mink who was unaware of exactly where Raizo was being kept, but knew when he initially arrived, and informed Jack and Kaido. And so this is where some people might chime in and say that the minks don't use Dendenmushi and don't seem to have the technology available to communicate with others outside of their country. But at the very same time that this was brought up, Frankie revealed that he had seen wild Dendenmushi, wild snails, on their island, and that it would be easy to turn them into communication devices. So then it would be extremely possible for a traitorous mink to do the same in order to communicate with people outside of Zou. And so the last thing that I want to bring up is that if some mink on Zou has some connection to Kaido, then you would presume that that mink would have had at some point in time left Zou. So all of this information is before you, and now the real question is who would it be? Who fits all of the parameters? Who is suspicious? And guys, I stick to the very last thing, the last theory that I talked about regarding this, that the most suspicious mink, by far, the only one with substantial evidence whatsoever implicating them as a traitor, is Bryanfavr, the monkey mink. And so we'll start with the very last thing that I said, that in order for somebody to be a subordinate of Kaido, but live on Zou, suggests that at some point in time, they must have left Zou. Is there any implications whatsoever that Bryanfavr might have some point in the past left Zou? And the answer to this is yes. You guys will notice that when Bryanfavr speaks, he adds de gosaru at the end of pretty much everything that he says. He is the only mink that does this. And so guys, the translators of these scanlations provides us with insight as to what this could mean. That it most likely refers back to a phrase that old samurai used to use, de gozaru, which is a variant of desu. But it's important to note that this particular usage refers to old Japanese or a samurai way of speaking. And it is also important to point out that none of the samurai revealed in the story, none of the friends, Kinemon, Kanjuro, and Raizo or Momonosuke use this phrase. So why exactly does Bryanfavr? This also ties in with a correct theory from earlier in the Zou arc, where we can see Bryanfavr falling off of the elephant Zou. And while he's falling, he says, eat, 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 and Kanjuro noticed that this is the very same sound, or a very similar sound, to that which Raizo makes while he runs. Monkey see and monkey do. This almost very nearly confirmed the idea that the minks had actually encountered Raizo on Zou despite their admission that he had never been there. And this was obviously before it was revealed that they were protecting him the entire time. And then so taking this back to Bryanfavr, de gosaru could in some way imply that Bryanfavr had encountered someone who commonly uses this phrase, and it isn't Kanjuro, it isn't Kinemon, it isn't Momonosuke, and it isn't Raizo, so perhaps it's another samurai from Wano. The very same Wano controlled by the shogun who hated Odin and all of his vassals, as well as currently being controlled by Kaido. This, in my opinion, guys, is the strongest connection any of the minks that were present on Zou have to potentially Kaido and Wano. So then let's look at Bryanfavr further. Is there anything else that seems suspicious? And oh my god guys, yes. If you'll remember, Bryanfavr fell off of Zou and essentially was stuck with the samurai as they attempted to climb up, for the most part relatively unsuccessfully for some time. When they finally arrive at the top, you can see Bryanfavr, and he seems quite concerned, despite the fact that as a mink, he should have been excited for and looking forward to the samurai arriving. And then Kinemon says this to Bryanfavr, "But Sir Eat, you still haven't really told us anything. Why exactly has Bryanfavr not told the samurai, the people that are friends with his entire country, anything? Or at the very least suspected them of being members of Kaido's crew or some kind of enemy?" But he confirms later that he did know that they were in fact samurai. And we can also presume that once they had arrived, he went to go ring the bell of welcoming, not the raid bell, meaning that he did not suspect them as enemies, but at the same time never vetted that they were in fact Raizo's companions. And it is also possible, given that we didn't see what occurred in the time between when Bryanfavr fell and they arrived at the top, that they did in fact confirm they were the subordinates and vassals of the Kozuki. Basically, Oda has made it ambiguous as to where exactly Bryanfavr stands with the samurai, the companions of Raizo. And this leads into the next thing, which is this is what Bryanfavr said to Kinemon. I don't know anything about anything. And then he runs off. Why exactly was Bryanfavr in such a hurry? If only to ring the welcoming bell. And this leads into the most persuasive point, guys. Kinemon says, "Wait, Sir Eat, guide us." And then Bryanfavr says this. "This is huge trouble. Samurais. I have to hurry and report this. Samurais. Who is he going to report this to? Is he going to report this to the minks or potentially to Kaido?" Certainly, ringing the welcoming bell could be described as a means of reporting the samurai's arrival to the rest of the minks, but this still doesn't justify why Bryanfavr himself would not tell the samurai anything, and why exactly he was in such a hurry. And even in the very next chapter, we see as Bryanfavr was alone ringing the bell, he says to himself, "This is bad. Samurai have come." Do you see just how ambiguous this is? Oda very cleverly hid this with the idea that the minks would not be excited for the samurai's arrival, but when it was revealed shortly after this that they were protecting Raizo the entire time, all of these events with Bryanfavr become suspect. He is the only mink who suggests that the arrival of the samurai is in any way bad news. And guys, there's just more. There's more. Which is that when Jack arrived back to Zou, where is Bryanfavr, he is on the lookout for him, but never rings any kind of bell. And when Zunisha's trunk one-shots his entire fleet, we see Bryanfavr and he seems upset. The only mink who seems upset by the fact that Jack was defeated. And even at the very end of this arc, the very last time that we have seen Zou, Oda gave us reason to suspect Bryanfavr more. After Carrot left Zou by sneaking onto the Thousand Sunny, Wanda asked Bryanfavr this. "Why didn't you mention this earlier, Bryanfavr? I'm sorry, I wanted to, Wanda, but Carrot said if they told anyone, they'd stop her, and Carrot quietly gathered up her things." And then Wanda says this. "Ah, now I see. She bribed you, didn't she?" And Bryanfavr says, "But it's not like Carrot wanted to betray you, Wanda." And then Wanda places a hand on his head, and he sighs. What exactly does this tell you about Bryanfavr? Bryanfavr is a person who can be bought with bribes. That is a very unusual character trait in a situation in which we are suspecting Bryanfavr already. It's too much of a coincidence. And it's even suggested that Bryanfavr does not care about Carrot's well-being despite being her friend. Wanda says this, "I know, it's okay. I'm glad I learned sooner rather than later. I was actually beginning to worry where she'd gone. If Luffy and the others are with her though, she should be okay." And while this is happening, Bryanfavr is eating a banana and seems unconcerned with Carrot's well-being, despite having potentially put her into danger by not reporting what it is that she was going to do. And so guys, this is what we have to work with, and I do believe that out of all the minks, Bryanfavr is the most suspicious. But it seems like most people's problems with this theory is that they would expect a traitor to be a more prominent character. And while I disagree with this argument, I do think that there is some potential that Bryanfavr is not alone. Based on what we know of Bryanfavr, it seems as though he is suspect, but his allegiances can also be bought by a fellow mink who is far less suspicious. Guys, recently I was seriously going to argue this person to possibly be Carrot, but after the last couple chapters, this is completely thrown out of the window. I will not argue it at all. I just can't do it, but that doesn't mean that it can't be someone else. Someone completely above suspicion. And so the reason why this is so important, it's literally been bashed over our heads, that Kaido and Jack will return to Zou. Inuarashi states that it will happen. Kaido's crew through Appu knows that his fleet was destroyed and communications were cut. Jack himself is stuck under the water, but he is not dead. The Beast pirates will find him, and the trader on Zou will inform Kaido that Momonosuke is still there, leading Jack back to Zou in an effort to capture Momonosuke. And this time, guys, the Minks cannot stop him. Nekomamushi and Inuarashi were both gravely injured during Jack's last visit, and Nekomamushi has already left to retrieve Marco, so all that remains there are Inuarashi and his forces. This entire plot needs to be kept in mind because it could be reintroduced as soon as the beginning of Wano. Even if I'm wrong about Bryanfavr, the means by which Jack and Kaido's crew were able to follow Zunisha, and were able to ascertain that Raizo was on Zunisha, none of these problems have been solved, as Nekomamushi and Wanda basically tell us. So that it follows, and it would make sense for them to be aware that Momonosuke is still there and do something about that, attempt to capture him. But yeah, guys, I felt like reintroducing this topic because I feel like we're getting closer and closer to the moment in which it will either be relevant or not. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree or disagree and why. Specifically, if you have any thoughts about any possible traitor aside from Bryanfavr, potentially an accomplice, then let me know because I'm truly intrigued by that thought. But yeah, guys, share your thoughts. Like the video if you like the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video. Make sure to check out links to Discord, my last video about Fujitora, and Patreon in the description. I'm thinking about just doing this after every video now, thanking my Patrons for their awesome support, because without them, they have no idea how much they help me. But yeah, guys, subscribe if you haven't, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.